Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. Of course, I am your host, BMR. Thank you for everybody for coming on in, showing your love and support for the channel. I do appreciate that. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to Bigfoot, Michigan Rob on YouTube, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube, of course, Texas Front Porch on YouTube. Please share us out. Like, give that thumbs up. Turn on the alert bells. Leave a comment after the show. You can find us on iHeartRadio, Spreaker, also wherever podcasts are found. Thanks so much for that. If you like it and help support what we do around here, the super chat is open. It is a great way to show support for the show. Also, you can become a BMR pirate. Arr! You can join today. There's a couple hundred of you that are members. Thank you so much for that. That is appreciated. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, also on Instagram. Check out our About pages for current events coming up in an area around you. We just finished the Alabama Bigfoot Conference. It went pretty well. I enjoyed it. And what I enjoyed most about it was meeting you people that are loyal followers of all of us across the board. It was great putting the YouTube handle to your face. And I got to tell you, there wasn't a single person at that conference that did not know me, did not know Krista, Brandy, Tex, Jason, Barton Nunley was down there. Just you guys rock it. You really do. And it's so awesome to have met a lot of you in person for the first time. That's why I love doing these things. Not so much for the doing the talk or selling the books or whatever. It's about meeting you. That means a lot to all of us. We appreciate you and thank you for coming out. Our lineup through the week is Mondays is Texas Front Porch at 8 o'clock in the East to 11. Tuesday nights is myself and Krista from the Blondes and the Booze, 9 o'clock in the East. Wednesdays, Barton Nunley in Humanoids, 9 o'clock in the East. Thursday, right back here, Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, 1 o'clock in the East. Thursday night, the Blondes, the Booze, the Paranormal Podcast kicks it off at 9 at night. And also, Tex has a new show with Monica Rollins. It's called Our Paranormal World with Monica Rollins. That's on at 11 o'clock at night on Thursday. Then right back with the Blondes and Booze on Friday. And they kick it off at 8 o'clock in the East. Sunday, Truth or Tinfoil. That's Brandy and Randy's new YouTube show. Go check them out. Sunday, Tex, Infamous Minds. And that, of course, comes on at 7. And a special shout out for my buddy Josh Turner, PRT. Y'all know Josh. If not subscribe to him already. He's on throughout the week. And give him some love as well. Thank you to all of you for coming on in. It is greatly appreciated. I got a great guest, Dennis Carroll, joining us tonight. We're going to talk a little haunted Southwest. We're going to mix a lot of hauntings and strange activities that go on in our great planet called Earth. So thank you for that. And thanks for everybody for coming on in today. I see a lot of you already rolling in. I appreciate it. Oh, and one last thing, because I got to pull this up. I've got to thank everybody that bought my book, Bigfoot Michigan Rob Presents True Cryptid Encounters. Book 1, found on Amazon. For those of you that bought it, thank you. If you have not bought it, the book link is pinned at the top of the chat. And if you bought it, please leave a review when Amazon comes calling, because that does promote book sales. And I got to tell you this, the end of July, book 2 comes out at the end of July. So you might want to get this one first, because you got about, another month and a half or so before the second book comes out. It's already written, and I'm in the process of editing that as we speak, which is kind of harder than writing the book, to be honest with you. But enough of me. I'm going to bring out my awesome guest, Dr. Dennis Carroll.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon to you. Thanks for coming on. I didn't have a guest schedule for today, Dennis, because I was busy at the conference and I was lagging behind on my duties to rum up some people. But you're one of my main go-tos, and you've been on the show 4 or 5 times, and you, of course, have your own podcast show, Hunting the Shadows podcast, which has starting to take off, Dennis. I'm not always in the live chat, but I watch the replay, because that's the great thing about YouTube. You can always catch the replays. There's so many great shows out there that, so I catch you, I watch you, and you do a fantastic job. So congratulations on the show.
Well, thank you. I enjoy it. It's something I've been wanting to. I was telling somebody the other day, Rob, I wish we would have had this media about 20 years ago. Things would have really been interesting then, for sure.
It would have been interesting. And here's the thing about that: 20 years ago, I don't know when YouTube started doing shows or all these other platforms that we all use, but now, let's say 10 years ago, in this particular genre or field, there was not a hell of a lot of podcasters out there. But now it seems like the competition doing what we do, it's just intense because if there was 100,000 people that talked about cryptids, Bigfoot, ghosts, the paranormal, there's maybe 100,000. And I swear there's probably a million, just
Well,
saturating the
once
market.
upon a time, Rob, if you said anything about these kind of things, they were ready to lock you up somewhere. Actually,
They would
that's
throw
the
away
way
the
things.
key.
That's the
Yeah.
way they looked at things. But now it's more out in the open, and that's good. That's good. In that way. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's good it's out in the open. More and more people coming forward. Hey, my book that I wrote, and you know this, Dennis, it was from people that contacted me that I spoke with, interviewed the majority of them. They didn't want to come on the show because they
Hmm.
still have that fright factor, that fear factor. If my boss sees it, I'll get fired. If my wife sees it, she'll divorce me. I mean, really, and really, I no,
Yeah.
literally though, odd
Yeah.
thing. I've got
Yeah.
odd conversations with people over this entire phenomenon.
Hmm. It is. Well, the ridicule is still there. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had paranormal groups over the years. I've had several. I mean, I had members who were in law enforcement. I even had one that was security in a nuclear facility. I had to give them anonymous names to keep their jobs. To keep their careers. They couldn't allow their identities to be out. So this stuff still goes on. There's still a patina of ridicule and all around this whole field, no matter which you look at, whether it's paranormal, cryptid, whatever. It's still there. We still have to deal with it. It's just quite not quite as bad. It's more open now, but we still have to deal with that. And when it comes to the general public, I've had a lot of people. I know you've had this same experience, especially writing your book. I've had a lot of people come to me with thousands of stories over the years and all that. And I've often thought I could write two or three books on some of this stuff. I've had so many of them, but they always you have a lot of people that say, "Oh, I don't believe in that stuff. That's a bunch of junk." Well, let me tell you what somebody told me. They
Yes.
always come in with that. There is I think deep down inside a lot of people, there's a willingness to believe some of this stuff, no matter what. They really believe it. They don't want people to know that. You know?
Yeah, because you'll get judged, you'll get classified as Rob's a weirdo, Dennis is a weirdo. I mean,
Yeah.
and let's face it, when I first had my encounter in 2018, it took me forever to make it public and talk about it. But the best thing I could have done was going public and speaking about it because it really helped clear some of my thoughts, that I had
Oh
running through
yeah.
my head.
Oh yeah.
And the sad thing though,
Absolutely.
and the
You
sad
don't want to hold something like that in, Rob. It does have an effect on you.
the longer I held it
And
in, the crazier I thought I was becoming. Although I know I wasn't crazy, but when you have that belt,
uh
and it's with anything in life, it don't have to be seeing a ghost or a dog man or a Bigfoot. Anything that is traumatizing to you, the best therapy is to speak about it. And that's what we try to do on this show. That's what I try to do with the book. And Dennis, yourself, you've written several
uh
books in all the genres. All of Dennis'
uh
links, by the way, everybody, are in the description of this because not only are you a researcher, experiencer, you're a demonologist, you're a great author, you've experienced it all. So for the people, maybe perhaps this is the first time coming across Dennis Carroll, why don't you give us a brief rundown of your background?
Well, I've been involved in all of this for about 55 plus years now. I feel there's no time I can really remember in my life that I wasn't interested in the supernatural and the paranormal stuff. I had some earlier experiences when I was young that sort of lit the fire under me to learn more of what I experienced and what happened to me. And the deeper I got into it, it's like the rabbit holes we talk about, Rob. When you get down in the rabbit hole, you suddenly find out there's a whole network of rabbit holes down there. And that's where I went. I went in through the rabbit holes, and one led to one led to another, and it went on and on the network. And when it comes to the paranormal, whether it be cryptid, demonology, whatever the site, I love the whole pie. I don't want just one slice of it. It's all fascinating stuff to me.
It is fascinating. And tonight's show, or today, see, tonight, I'm on nights, I'm on days, my whole day is discombobulated. And tonight's show, and the great thing about you, I think, like I mentioned earlier, you've been on 4, 5, 6 times. What I love about Dr. Dennis Carroll is we always talk something different each and every time you're on. And today's show, we're going to go all over the place, but the topic was like starting out with is the haunted Southwest and the Kushtaka and a few other things we're going to get into. So wherever you want to take it, let's get into it.
Well, to begin with, I was going to talk about something a little bit further north than the Southwest. Okay. Before we get to the Southwest, that's Kushtaka. The Kushtaka.
Yeah, let's do it. Now, Kushtaka is I think I'll let you talk about it. It's like a shape-shifting entity.
Well, this is very interesting. The Kushtaka is of course, a Native American legend in the in the Northwest, and it is supposed to be a being that is a shapeshifter, but it can most of the time appear to look like a cross between a man or a hybrid of a man and a otter. That's like and there are otters in the sea, and also there are otters in the rivers. And the reason why I wanted to mention a lot of this today is we're going to be talking about some things that are connected with water here.
Okay.
And the Kushtaka is a very dangerous individual thing to run into. According to legend, this being can twist and bend time and space. It can foster illusions. It can mimic the sound of crying babies or women to lure you into the woods. The Kushtaka if it can lure you into the lake, supposedly will turn you into a Kushtaka. If it does that. It is a fascinating thing in cryptozoology that we're talking about here, and it has very distinct parallels with the Selkies. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the Selkies are the same almost type being in Ireland, or the Celtic regions of the world, Ireland and Scotland. The Selkie acts the same way that the Kushtaka does, and it's very fascinating to me, Rob, that you got two places in this world so completely far apart from each other, like continents away from each other, that have the same almost kind of a cryptid. That's interesting. You have to wonder about some of these things if people have not actually saw or experienced or encountered some of these things. But the Selkie is very much like the Kushtaka. It will lure you into the water, whether it be a river, a loch, or the sea, whatever. It will lure you into the water and turn you into what it is if you follow it. But here's another interesting aspect of it. It can shapeshift, and so can the Selkie. The Selkie can sometimes appear to look like a horse. And if you get on the back of this horse, it will take you into the ocean and drown you and turn you into a Selkie. The Kushtaka almost is the same way. Although it doesn't take the form of a horse, it can take the form of deer, elk. It can do other things in the Northwest woods. It's fascinating stuff when you get into this, and how they correlate almost the cultures and the folklore of these completely world away different people from each other. That's the fascinating aspect.
With the Kushtaka, right? That's how you say Kushtaka?
Yeah. Kushtaka.
It's more of a lake dwelling creature. I mean, what does this kind of look like? Does it have like webbed hands and claws, or I mean, what's what does it resemble when we're talking about these cryptids? We're all familiar with the dog man and Bigfoot. What's kind of
Hmm.
some of the characteristics in
Well,
appearance?
it looks a lot like an otter and a cross between an otter and a man. Now, if you know what an otter looks very much like, uh, now the selkie, on the other hand, looks sort of like a man, or can be a man or a woman, as the Kushtaka can too. The selkie looks like a seal and a combination of seal and a man, or a sea lion and a man. And the Kushtaka is the otter. It looks kind of like, has the otter attributes of the otter and a man combined. Uh, well, the interesting thing about it is so malevolent. It lures you into the woods. It can kill you. Sometimes it will kill you. Sometimes it will eat you. Sometimes it will turn you into what it is. And it's very similar. I know you're very familiar with the water babies. You've heard of those in Alaska. The water babies. It's kind of similar to that. You know, there are a lot of Native American legends that talk about the water babies, and they look like little children. They float in the water, and they try to lure you into the water and drown you. And that's the malevolent part of these things.
Yeah, I mean,
They're not considered good in many ways.
I
Uh,
certainly don't think that's good.
no, it's not. Definitely not. And but there have been some instances, supposedly, where the Kushtaka has helped people. Some people that would be lost or almost dying. It would actually. There's one story where a Kushtaka actually brought some fish to some people that kept
Okay.
them alive. It just, I think it depends on how you react to the Kushtaka, and that's what these legends talk about. If you kind of disrespect him, he's going to disrespect you. That's just kind of the way it goes.
Yeah,
That's
it's
an
kind of like
interesting aspect.
it is interesting. It's kind of like mixed emotions. I mean, or it gives off a different vibe with certain people, I guess. Then, right? If your
Yeah.
intentions, or maybe it senses that a person is not a good person, and maybe that's their
Mhm.
they act upon that. And if you're a good, kind-hearted person, they'll give you fish, or they'll take it to the depths of the lake,
Yeah.
and as you
Mhm.
mentioned, perhaps turn you into some
Nika
sort of
Stalker.
because
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. I
Yeah.
can't
Well,
imagine.
here's another thing. There, a lot of cryptids are similar to that, Rob. A lot of cryptids is how your, like you said, your intentions are. I know that with Bigfoot and even some dogman things. You know, like I said, that sometimes they will cut you a break. You know, if you're kind of respectful to them, they kind of give that back to you. And I find that interesting that even the cryptids have sort of a human way of acting on things in that respect.
Is it true to some of these shape shifting beings? And I think maybe it's the Wendigo. It's, I think, more of a spiritual entity where a lot of times, if you are, a lot of these things will cast a curse upon a person. And as you
Hmm.
may mention earlier about the Kushtaka, you might become a Kushtaka. What's your opinion or your thoughts on a lot of these shapeshifters where they overtake your body, your soul, and the only way that
Well,
you can break an offering a loved one? Have you heard those stories?
hmm well, you got to look at some of these things. Some of these things have been classified as cursed beings. In other words, the Wendigo comes about by bad and evil things that have happened. Starvation, cannibalism, and all that is tied into that cryptid. But then you have other cryptids like the Kushtaka and some other ones. The Kushtaka is sort of like a force of nature too, kind of a thing. You know, it's like a force of nature in that respect. And also, like with Bigfoot and Dogman, like I've said, we know Bigfoot has a reputation of being the guardian of the forest, kind of a
Right.
thing. And then you would kind of look at Kushtaka as being sort of the guardian of the waterways, whether it be the lake or the ocean or
Mhm.
something like that. In that respect, they're tied to an element. They're elemental type beings to that extent. And I think that's an interesting attribute that they have as well. But now you take something that I call a cursed cryptid, very much like the Wendigo or the Loop Guru or the rougarou, as some people call it. You have these things that sort of laboring under a curse. Now you look at the very famous skinwalkers, and we're going southwest now. You
Okay.
look at some of the very famous skinwalkers. What are they? They are human beings. They are witches, if that's what you want to call them. That's what they are, sorcerers. But they are human beings. But yet they can become cryptids. They can, by black magic, turn into these things. They can either be a coyote, a wolf, a raven, whatever, or sometimes they can appear as monstrous looking things like the Kushtaka. The Kushtaka, if you run into him, is a monster. That's the only way you could classify it because of the way it looks and probably sometimes the way it acts. Anything that goes against human nature, whether it be a sorcerer, a shaman, a shaman, or whatever the name, whatever you want to call these things, if they're going against human nature, they are sort of human monsters in that respect. To me, that's interesting. And that's where the werewolf, the European werewolf, how do you get him? There's different ways you get the werewolf. You can be cursed. You can be a wolf man. You can be. We've talked about this before. I think we did a show about werewolves one time with that. We had different types of werewolves, and the worst one of all, of course, is the witch, the sorcerer, that puts on the werewolf pelt and turns into this beast, this psychological, this psychotic killer. I've said this. I've said this about the werewolf and the dog man. Okay.
Yes.
Dog man might cut you a break. The werewolf will not. He's going to tear you to pieces, no matter what, whatever's in his way. And we're going to be talking about some more things like that in the Southwest in a few minutes. But anyway, that is the difference in a lot of these things. But you're dealing with sometimes cursed entities, and
Mhm.
you're also dealing with elemental type entities.
Yeah.
And then you're also dealing with human monsters in that respect. You got some fascinating stuff.
It's fascinating. And you had made mention too about the werewolf and like the dog man, two separate entities where the werewolf is cursed like a shapeshifter and they want
Mm-hmm.
to take human life. Dogman,
Mm-hmm.
outside of the LBL, I haven't had many reports of it being a evil creature. Although, what I will say about the Dogman, there's not a report I got where it was terrifying. Right when they gave you that look that they could kill you at any moment, and you mentioned about Bigfoot and some Native Americans classified as the protector of the woods. And I
Mm-hmm.
found it odd a couple of weeks ago. There was a guy on the show that said the Dogman was a soldier for Bigfoot, and I had never heard that before. I know Bigfoot can take care of itself. It does 9 foot tall, 1,200 pounds. Have you heard stories about Dogman and Bigfoot working together?
That's a possibility. Other animals do that. Do you know that there is a distinct relationship between wolves and ravens?
Hmm.
They actually work together. The ravens will actually lead wolves to carrying sometimes dead animals or to fresh kills. They will lead them there and let the wolves feed, and then the ravens will come in and take out the scraps. They
Hmm.
work together.
Yeah, I think all the animals do work together in a way, and I've heard that story about the ravens being the guide for both good and evil. It's who I've heard, right? We saw the
Hmm.
movie The Crow, where in that movie he operated through the eyes of the raven or the hawk or whatever it was. Like it was 20 long time ago when I saw it. But anyway, moving on, yeah, to this creepy haunted Southwest. Yeah, why don't we explore that a little further?
Okay, well, the interesting thing about that, you've got a lot of legends out in the Southwest. Let me tell you a quick one, right quick. And this is sort of a cowboy legend. Okay, since we're in the Southwest,
Yes.
it talks about a game of poker they had one night. It was your typical dark, stormy night, and they were playing poker in a saloon. And there weren't that many people. And it was late at night. Just a few people, stragglers in the saloon. And this tall, dark stranger comes in and
Mm,
joins the game. And the strange thing about this guy, he was all wrapped up and he had on a black hat. His face was hid. but he kept winning hand after hand after hand of the poker game. And then things guys are thinking, hey, this just this is not right. You just don't win that much, time after time after time. So one of the guys drops his card on the floor and he reaches down to pick it up and he looks and he sees the feet of the stranger and they're cloven hooves. And what they're doing is they're playing poker with the devil.
I gotta tell you really briefly. I only say this, it resonates with the story Tex was telling me. He was investigating last year. I think it was the Haunted Hill House, and this was known for a demonic activity in poker playing. And they had it set up where they were actually playing poker with an alleged entity who was at the table. Now they didn't. I wasn't picking up cards, you guys, or anything like that. But they dealt the cards out. It was straight up. Everybody got dealt 5 cards. It was okay, and they dealt it to an open chair, an open seat, which they invited the ghostly or the demon. I think his name was Rory or Ralph or something. I don't know. It's on Texas Front Porch. It's a pretty cool show. So they dealt out the cards, and it was Tex, Bob, his buddy Bob, and another person. And so they dealt the cards up straight up, and then they turned over the cards. Well, Tex had, I think it was, of his 5 cards, he had 2 aces and 2 kings. His buddy Bob had a losing hand. The other person had a losing hand, and I can't forget the other. They're all losing hands. And then he went to. So Tex boasted that I've got they turn over the cards, and Tex boasts he had the best hand, and he called out at this demon that they hoped was sitting in the chair where they dealt the cards. Do you know what? When they turned over the alleged entity's seats where the cards were dealt, it had 3 6s and 2 jacks. I mean, and Tex don't make stuff up. This literally happened. Then Bob called the open chair where no one was sitting a cheater. Okay. Within minutes, he had felt heat on his back like he was getting stretched, lifted up his back shirt, and there was red scratches that almost formed what appeared to be a pentagram on his back. We got photos of that, by the way.
Yeah,
That is pretty strange. Pretty strange stuff.
There's a
I didn't mean to deviate from the story, but I had to tell that story because it kind of resonated with me when you were talking about the poker in the Southwest.
Well, there's a story. I'll tell you this real quick. There's a story where they actually played a game of poker in the saloon where Wild Bill Hickok was supposedly killed. He was shot in the back while he was playing poker. And they said the freakiest thing about it, they felt like his spirit was there with them that night. And they said the weirdest thing of all was the dead man's hand kept turning up in the poker game. And if you know that combination of the dead man's hand, I think it was black aces and 8s or something like that. I forget exactly which one, but it kept turning up over and over again in the game, and they said that really spooked them, because that was what Wild Bill was supposed to be holding when he was shot.
That is spooky. That would freak me out. What happened to Tex back there would have freaked me out too. It's like, wow, just strange things. It's kind of unexplainable, even for people that are skeptics. If you walk into a facility like that or any creepy situation, when it happens to you, you just don't know how to process. You don't know how to process it.
There's another legend in the Southwest about dancing with the devil. About this young girl. She was a young Mexican girl, and her name was Serena, something like that. Anyway, her mother, she was going out to the dance that night, and it was on a Sunday night. And of course, a lot of the people in the Southwest are Catholic, very Catholic based. And the mother said, you don't dance on Sunday nights. You'll end up dancing with the devil. Something bad will happen. You're supposed to light candles in church on Sunday. You're not supposed to go to the dance. But
Yeah.
the girl, she laughed, said, "Ah, mother, that's old stuff," and said, "I'm going to have some fun times." And so she left. But supposedly during the dance that night, this stranger comes in and she dances with him, and it turns out it's the devil. And all of a sudden, at the end of the dance, there's a big puff of smoke, and she's gone, never to be seen again. And that's what you get for dancing on Sunday night.
Never again. Never again. We catch me dancing on Sunday night.
You have to watch out for that, definitely. But when I got to talking about the Kushtaka and some of these other, the water babies and the silkies and all that, that led me to the number one, I think, scariest legend of all in the Southwest, and that's La Llorona, the weeping woman. She is always around waterways, lakes, ponds, streams, the ocean, sometimes, whichever. She is a fascinating legend, the weeping woman. Um, she always is supposedly dressed in white, Rob, and I think you have a lot of sightings. I know you're familiar with this, of women in white that are seen, ghostly women in white. And she is definitely one of them. Of course, the other is the banshee, and I won't get into that today, but it's very much like the Irish banshee in some ways. La Llorona is a very tragic story, though, behind it, that she supposedly wanted to this marry this man, but she had two children, and he wouldn't marry her because she already had two children by a previous marriage, and she drowned her two children so that she could
Mm.
be with this man. And felt very, of course, very remorseful after this. The man still spurned her, and she went and then drowned herself. And supposedly, the last thing she was saying is, "Where are my children? Where are my children?" And she drowned herself, and supposedly her spirit to this day haunts the waterways, the lakes, and ponds of the Southwest. And if you hear her crying or weeping, a lot of people will go to find out what's wrong. Like if you were somewhere, like in a park, and you heard somebody crying, you would be curious to say what's going on. So has
Es-
somebody done something to this person? You know?
es- Especially if it was like
Yeah.
weeping children. Because I think a lot of
Hmm.
these malevolent or malevolent forces imitate
Hmm.
children to entice you into
Hmm.
exploring, investigating further, then they get you.
Yeah, and she does that too. Supposedly, she cries and weeps like children. She lures you to the water side and drowns you. Mostly, she drowns children. She's mostly after children and not grown people. Was told a story some years ago, and I'll relate it to you about this family. They were out picnicking one day, and they were out by a lake. And the family, there was a man, the woman, of course, his wife, and two little kids. I think it was a little boy and a little girl.
Hmm.
And they had a fun day at a picnic, out by the lake. And there weren't that many people there. And as the day got older and went on, more people left, and they finally had the place by themselves almost. And the picnic was over, and the kids were playing. And all of a sudden, this guy hears somebody crying. And he hears somebody saying, "Where's my children? Where's my children?" Of course, he had children, and parents realize, if your child gets missing or something, you definitely want to help somebody find their children. And so he gets up and he walks up and he sees this woman. Now, I'll describe what he sees. He saw a very rather tall woman with long black or very brown, dark brown hair. And he described her as having white. She had on like a white white shirt, dress, and long hair over. And her hair, he said, was down to her waist almost. That's how long it was. And she was very thin and very pale, but he could not see her face very well. But he could, between the hair, he could see a little bit. It was a pale face. She was down by the water side, and she turned to him when he walked up. He said, "Ma'am, Can I help you? There's something wrong, you know. And she turned to him and she said, Where are my children? Where are my children? And he said, all of a sudden, it is, you know, when you see something like this, you get that weird, funky feeling this is not right. There's something very wrong here, you know. And he said it immediately washed over him. He said almost like a fear came on him. And he said, and there was like emanating from this woman a coldness. And that's when he noticed a very distinct thing, Rob. She was like floating 1 foot off the ground.
Wow.
Yeah. And said she started moving towards him and she kind of held her hands out. And when he did that, he said, I turned and I took off. He said he got the kids, he got his wife, and they ran. And here's the interesting thing. He could look back and see her striding just like you would stride, like you would walk, but she was walking on air. And she was getting closer to them preternaturally more than somebody would, unless they were like running at you or whatever. He said every time he looked back, she was closer than before. Well, they made it to an old churchyard cemetery that was there. And here's the interesting thing, Rob. When they ran in the cemetery, she stopped.
Oh, wow.
She wouldn't go in the cemetery because it was a churchyard. Now, let me explain one thing. A churchyard and a regular cemetery are two different places in respect to the fact a churchyard is consecrated ground.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a church. That's where, you know, it's a God's consecrated ground type of thing. Whereas in a cemetery is a public thing, you know, in that respect. It is not connected to a church.
All
She
right.
immediately stopped. She stopped at the gate of this and would not come in that cemetery. He said we stayed in there for several hours until we could see that she was gone. And we left. And he said that was the scariest thing that ever happened to him in his life. He had nightmares for years after that. That was a La Llarona.
Ooh, the floating apparition. I think that's terrifying. In my lifetime, I've seen a couple ghosts. One as a kid, and one at a creek bed. Okay, it was. I got to give you a little background on this, Dennis. Give me your take on this. Back, I think in 1967, it was. There was a young couple. They're teenagers. They're old enough to drive, 18, 19 years old. And there's this place where I live, where I currently live today. Even I moved back in my neighborhood, and it's a sharp curve. It's called Dead Man's Curve. Okay,
Uh-huh.
and at the curve, there's the curve leads right into a creek, and at the bottom of the creek, there's a bridge. So this young couple dating, I guess, whatever it was, they were driving a convertible and they were going extremely fast down the roadway until they didn't realize that that curve came up on them very quickly, and they
Uh-huh.
went straight across, and the car elevated, landed into the creek that roams through there. And at the top of the bridge, well, first of all, the boy, young kid, he flew out of the car. He was killed immediately. And his girlfriend, her head hit the bottom of the bridge and got decapitated.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it got hence Dead Man's Curve. And that wasn't the first, that was the first death that occurred there, but also though many accidents did occur there. A lot of, because if you're not familiar with the neighborhood and you're driving like a maniac, this is going to happen. Just like in the mountains, you don't go fast in the mountains, you might end up off the cliff. You know what I mean? They have a lot of winding roads, twisting roads. So legend has it that, and I say legend to start, that the creek area was haunted by this ghost of the lady, the decapitated lady. So we heard stories growing up as I was getting older in life about this apparition. And I kid you not, I was 19 and my buddies were about 18, 19. We're seniors in high school, but we always used to hang out at Dead Man's Curve. We go there,
Right.
it was smoke cigarettes, drink beer. You know, it was very secluded, a good place to get away from your mom and dad. You know, do our thing. And there's a path, a beaten down path, and we're going on the path, and this is the pathway to our house. Now, at the time, my house is maybe 10, 15 minutes from here. Nice little hike up there. And we're looking in the distance, and we see this glowing light. It was myself, my friend Brian, and my friend Darren. And we stopped middle of the trail, and we're looking at this light. And this light, illuminated light, like a bluish white. It was getting closer, closer, and closer. And it was hovering above the ground, but it first started like a ball. Then maybe, Dennis, it gets maybe 25, 30 yards from us, where the ball elongated into a figure of a woman, a headless woman, and it started rushing toward us. And in my mind, not physically, but in my mind, I hear this crazy like laughter in my head. And we look at each other and we said, "Oh my God, this is real. That's a ghost. That's something." We all turned around and we ran home. I got home. I told you it was 15-minute hike. I got home in 5 minutes and not look over my shoulder all the way there, all the way to my home, right? I got in my house. My mom and dad looked at me like, "What the hell? What have you been doing?" I just went to my bedroom. I didn't say what I saw, right? Next morning, I called my buddies. Back then it was your rotary dial phone. So I call one at a time. Let's hook up. And I said, before we hook up, you guys, let's draw what we think we saw. So we all agreed to make a drawing. And we met at my buddy's garage, out back of his mom's house. And we go up in our little fort we had, how young guys do, right? And we all compared our pictures. And it was the same. It was almost, now we're different skill levels with drawing, of course, but all of our pictures had the same semblance of what we saw. So for me, that was unification, that we saw the same thing. What was it? Was it the ghost of that lady that got decapitated? I don't know, but it's not ironic. But it's I don't call it coincidence or irony, where this thing was a headless woman in a long dress. I'll never forget that day of my life. And it was like, when I was 19 years old.
Well, you got to look at where it happened. That's too far out to be a coincidence.
Yep,
They
for sure.
definitely got to be tied together. Definitely. Well, the first time, Rob, I ever saw an apparition, a full-bodied apparition, I didn't even know that's what I was looking at. I thought it was a person. I mean, it looked so real and so solid at that time. It happened in a hallway of a house. But the woman at the very end of the hallway, and I was looking down the hallway, and it was dark, but it was not dark, dark. I mean, you could see, there was ambient light. And what I was doing, I was setting up a laser blanket to capture, to capture video, to hopefully capture shadow, or whatever.
Yeah.
Was a laser blanket. I was setting it up. And I was looking down the hall, and I see this elderly lady cross the hall from one room to another room over. And I could see her where it was, just as same as I'm looking at you. I could even see the print on the house coat that she was wearing. And she had long gray hair. And she didn't even look at me. She just crossed, just like somebody would cross from one room to the next. Well, I thought, well, who is that? I thought there was only one woman in this house, and that wasn't her. This one lady. So I went to the lady. I said, "Ma'am, is there somebody else in the house? Besides us, all the people that's supposed to be there." I said, "Another woman around here?" She said, "No, it's just me." I said, "Well, I saw somebody," and she said, she kind of had a funny look. Said, "Who did you see?" And I described to her. I described the house coat, the hair. She said, "Oh my God, that's my mother. She passed away in that room."
Wow.
That was Rick, but it looked just as solid, but the one time you see something like that, you don't have the camera going. That's the way it goes. That's the way it always seems to go.
I don't have the. Of course, back when I saw that ghost, the apparition, whatever it was, obviously in the day, I don't think the cell phone wasn't even made available. Again, like I said, it was rotary dial, and I got to ask you this too. You brought up photos, and it's kind of a little off topic, but I think it'll fit what we're talking. You ever notice those pictures that you get personally, or you see them on Facebook, or you see them on the internet? And to me, I always brushed it off as maybe pareidolia or something. But I was talking to this guy, and I said, "How do you account for pictures in the forest of the tree line?" And you pull it up, and what appears to be a multitude of faces. I'm not suggesting Dogman or Cryptid or anything because the ones I see, the faces are kind of deformities. Looks like a humanoid of something, an entity perhaps, but there's like a cluster of like 10 of them all hovering in the woods. So I kind of always thought that those were something else, something not supernatural, just unexplainable. So, but I'm talking to a friend of mine who I've known for a while, and he says that no, those are actual some of the best pictures you can get because that is some of these apparitions, entities, however you want to classify it, just kind of piercing through the veil for immediately, and they're
Kind of
caught off guard, just kind of entering.
manifesting.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's not uncommon for them all to come out at once. So I got to thinking about that, looked at a couple more pictures, and I'm just now processing what my friend had told me. So what do you think? I think that that's probably very plausible, because you got the opening into the veil or these portals that we have, or maybe not coming fully through a portal, just it's coming through, but then drops back and vanishes. That might be an explanation for some of these things that I deem a lot of times as pareidolia.
Well, I want to say something about that, Rob. Definitely, there is a fine line between pareidolia and reality. Okay,
Yeah.
a very,
Mhm.
very fine, thin line.
Yeah.
And you got to remember one thing about the human brain. It's always trying to assimilate shapes and forms because of the connection between your eyes and your brain. Okay. That's just the way the human mind works. We're always looking for faces or forms of things, patterns that we're trying to see in things. Sometimes we see a lot of things that we want to see that may not necessarily be there. We want to see it so badly that the mind helps us create that in our own perception. Okay. Um, I like that very famous quote. There are things known and there are things unknown, and in between are the doorways of perception. Is how do you perceive these things sometimes that you look at. But it's not that far fetched that sometimes people not catch things that are manifesting from one reality to another. I've seen things do that. I have seen the demonic do that on several occasions. They manifest through reality from there. I believe that there is. I talked about this on my show last night, Hunting the Shadows. I believe there is a fifth dimension, and that dimension is spiritual.
Hmm.
So it's said, and the things that exist in that dimension cross over into our physical dimension from
Yeah.
time to time. And you see this manifestation sometimes. And it takes on different forms. It can be shadow people. It can be, and we're going to talk a little bit about the stick men that you see in the
Oh
Southwest,
yeah.
the black stick men. These things have got to be some kind of interdimensional beings. I believe without a doubt they're coming from this spiritual dimension into our reality, our physical reality. But they do it in different ways and in different forms sometimes. That's just the way that works. I believe they're going through portal like things or something. But a lot of times, and believe me, in my career, I have had untold thousands of pictures sent to me, shown to me, video. I have gone over hours and hours of video. I had somebody the other day claim that they had fairies showing up on there, and it's basically what it is. It's a spider web blowing in the wind. Okay, I mean you can see these things for what they truly are, and not for what you want to believe that they are. You can't let your belief get in the way of being as completely unbiased as you possibly can humanly be when you evaluate evidence. Okay, you got to do that, and you can't just take a. Let me give you a quick point. I had a lady come to me and she was interested in the paranormal and stuff like that. And she had a swimming pool in her backyard, and one of these above ground swimming pools. And she said, "Look, Mr. Carroll, look at all of these faces in the water." She took a picture of it, And I said, "Ma'am, those are not faces. That's water. Okay, that's water. But you're reading something into this that's not really there.
Right.
Okay, you've got to be very careful about that. That's where paranoia comes in. And I have seen instances where there have been other things that people. I had a very famous, a very interesting picture sent to me by a lady, and it was just a picture of her in front of a window. Okay, it was a selfie she took on her cell phone, and behind her in the window, there's a werewolf standing there. It
Oh,
looks,
wow.
honest to God, like a werewolf looking in the window. But guess what it was, Rob? It was the back of her head and her hair, and the way it formed the reflection in the window.
Oh, okay.
That's what it
Yeah.
was. Okay, so that's what you got. That's what you run into. You got to be very careful. But I've had people come to me, look at this, look at that, look at that. I say, look, my number one policy is I can't form an opinion on it because I didn't take
Yeah.
the picture. That's the only
Yeah.
way I can take. If I take the picture, I can tell you more about it.
You're right.
But with AI and all this stuff going on nowadays, you don't know what to look. You don't know
No,
what to say about it.
you don't either. And I got to tell you this, and for those people that send me pictures on Facebook, whatever, thank you. But, I'm kind of pictured out. I mean, unless I know a person really, really well and I see some things, I'll go, yeah, I'll give them some credit for it. But you know what I like more than the pictures? Because I think it's harder to fabricate are these sounds that we hear, the vocalizations from the forest. I'm much more fascinated with the sounds, trying to determine what it is. Is it a Bigfoot, a dog man, some cryptid of the night? What's your thoughts on the audio portion versus picture? I think it's more credible in some instances.
You got to be careful with audio because there
Okay.
can be outside factors. When I wrote my book Beyond the Shadows, and I tell people how to go about investigating things, and that can be either whether it's a cryptid investigation or spiritual investigation or whatever. You have to go about with different techniques on how you assimilate your evidence, and
Okay.
you got to maintain that area almost as if it were a scientific experiment. You got to shut out everything. You got to contain it from outside interferences as much as possible, and you got to be very meticulous about that. Okay, because you can have outside sounds that can sound like sometimes like somebody whispering or something
Mhm.
means that, but I have heard audio that I was there and I took myself that was unmistakable speech. It wasn't, I mean, we used to classify it. I think it went from one to five, and five being the very best, level of the audio thing. And this was a five. I mean, it was very plain, very audible. And, but you get down to the scale on the one, and you got to wonder, is that, a cricket that you're hearing? Or is that somebody's car going down the street outside that's picking up on your mic or whatever? You got to be very meticulous when it comes to audio, just as much as video and still pictures. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, it does make sense, and I guess we all just have to. What I always try to do is debunk anything I find, especially if you take a picture or get the audio yourself. That's the first thing you should do, anyways. Because a lot of
Yeah.
times, what I've been listening to lately to get more familiar with the sounds of the forest, I've been listening to, like, as an example, the fox. Let me tell you something. I had my headphones on. I'm playing this, and there was like 50 different sounds from a fox, of which half of them were creepy as all get out. They were like, "Whoa, what is this?" I'm not every day in the forest. I don't hike every day. I don't camp every day. It's what I do when I can. I get out. So, but I couldn't. The vocalizations just from one little animal, as terrifying as some of them sounded, I can see where anybody can misidentify that, especially if you're a novice in the field.
Well, you ought to be with me when I have been out. I mean, alone in the mountains at night, and you hear a mountain lion sounds like a crying or screaming woman. You hear some freaky, freaky sounds out there in the forest. And, foxes can do that. Coyotes are good at that kind of stuff. The list goes on and on and on. And a lot of times, and I have heard people say, oh, this is Bigfoot screaming, or this is a dog. And it's not. It's it's very, very plain. It's probably a grunting bear or whatever the situation is. You can't, unless you can actually see what's making that noise, you're gonna
Okay.
have to kind of be ambiguous with that too. You know what I'm saying? You have to
Yeah.
really be very careful how you interpret that. But let me say you this, Rob. Okay, you and
Yeah.
I could have our picture taken by the best photographer in town of the ghost of Elvis Presley standing between us,
Okay.
and nobody will ever believe it.
Well,
Okay,
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what it's about. Nobody's ever gonna believe that. Here's the thing about it. I used to tell people this. I used to do this with my seminars and some of my lectures. I would say, look, my job is not to convince you of anything. That's
Yes.
not my job. My job is not to convince you. My job is to show you my evidence. But but you're the one that's gonna have to make up your mind about it, not me. I can't make your mind up for you. And that's the way that goes. No matter how good the evidence, you're gonna always have somebody that's not gonna believe it. It's
No.
not about the believing. It's not about the
Right.
believing.
No, it's
That's
not
what it
about
comes
the
down to.
believing. I don't try to convince. Back in 2018, I tried to convince people of what I've been experiencing or had experienced, especially with the Bigfoot. I don't do that today. My
Hmm.
job is to provide the information and data for everybody during the shows and help people and such because it's not, yeah, you're right. It's not our jobs to prove anything. You take the information, you watch the shows, you look at the pictures, listen to the audio, do your own research, and come up with your own opinion on
Hmm.
it. Because a lot of this is
Yeah,
opinion based. You know what I want to do, Dennis, really quickly? I told you I let out my brother's dog. This will take me 2 minutes. So why don't you promote yourself, talk to the people about your books, your website, and I'll be back in like 2 minutes. I let this dog out because
that's fine.
I don't want to have to
Okay.
clean up something after the show here. So just go ahead and talk
There you
about
go.
something about that, and I'll be back in about 2 minutes.
Okay. But yeah, that is interesting. Is the belief systems of people definitely? You got to be very careful what you believe, and you got to have something to back up that belief. It's like Carl Sagan said: extraordinary evidence requires extraordinary fact behind it. That's very true. But anyway, I would like to say, everyone listening today, please check my website out. That's denniswcarroll.com. And if you have any stories, anything you want to talk to me about, any questions, all right, you can reach me at denniswcarroll@gmail.com. And my podcasts are on Monday nights at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Road Less Traveled with my good friend Gerald Fountain. We have some very interesting podcast shows on that. And then Wednesday night, my premiere podcast, Hunting the Shadows, Wednesday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And also on Friday night, I have Paranormal Point of View at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. All my shows come on at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So check those out, please. And if you are interested in any of my books, they can be found on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Two of my main books on the paranormal are Beyond the Shadows and The Road Unseen. And all you got to do is type in Dennis W. Carroll, and that will take you to my books on Amazon. Okay, if you will check those out, I would really appreciate that. But yeah, it's been a long time, 55 plus years. Things still surprise me, Rob.
Thank you for giving me that little brief timeout I told you earlier. Yeah, of course, the dog, he had to go sniff around out in the yard,
Mm.
find that sweet spot. But he's quick. My brother and sister are in Las Vegas
Uh,
for the World Series of Poker, and so I went and picked up his dog because somebody else was done watching it. They had to go to work, so I got the dog for the next 2 weeks. He's a cool he's about 3 years old, little German Shepherd. So yeah, thank you for that. I hope you had an opportunity to talk to the people about where we can find you. And Dennis has got a lot of great books. Dennis is a wealth of knowledge in every aspect of all the phenomena. And before we move on, I want to talk about the Walking Sam. But I
Yeah,
first
walking sound. Yeah.
and really quickly, I like to do this through the show. Thank you to Keith for the super chat, Fisher of Spam for the super chat, Diane Boss for the super chat. I do. It's greatly appreciated. Not expected, but appreciated, and I'm very humbled every time somebody donates. You too can become a BMR pirate. Join today. Arr! Also, subscribe if you're new here to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube, Hunting the Shadows podcast with Dennis Carroll, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal podcast, Texas Front Porch. Thank you for that. So, with that being said, that's a little bit of the advertising done midway through here. And so, Dennis, yeah, I really want to get into this Walking Sam because I was reading up. He said we'll talk a little Walking Sam. So I started reading it. And I got to tell you, that's spooky.
Well, for walking sound is a very freaky thing, and there's a lot of, like I said, we said earlier, a lot of legends in the Southwest, and it's a very fascinating place. I had a good friend that used to live out there. He's deceased now. JC was a good friend of mine, and he was the Four Corners area, but they are a lot of weird actions, legends, and stories and things going on in the Southwest, especially around the reservations. I have some friends who live on some of the reservations out that way, and that's where J.C. Johnson lived out in there. And y'all know you've heard of J.C.
I've
Johnson,
heard of
I'm
him.
sure.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. We used to have some very interesting discussions about skinwalkers and all that. But when you think about the Southwest, there's a lot more than just skinwalker stuff going on. And around the reservations, you have some strange stories and legends being told. And I always like to see what's going on at the res, what they say is happening and all that. And one of the most interesting ones to come out of that is Walking Sam. Walking Sam is a very interesting entity. He's supposed to be very tall, very thin, almost like Slender Man. You remember Slender Man? Of course, Slender Man was a made up thing, creepy pasta thing that they made up.
Yeah.
But he looks a lot like Slender Man in that respect. Although Slender Man was described as having tentacles like an octopus in a kind of a way, he was a very weird character. But this guy, Walking Sam, is always dressed in black, and he's very tall, very thin. He wears a hat. I don't know, sometimes be a fedora or something like that. And you will see him walking along the road. Now, here's the interesting thing: people will tell you never stop and pick him up, never stop and say anything to him, ignore him, okay? Because to encounter him, you do so at your own peril. Because supposedly he's very good at making you disappear. If you get around, okay, it can sort of do away with you in that respect. Suddenly, you're just not there anymore. And a lot of people who see Walking Sam will speed up to get past him. I don't want anything to do with it. They'll speed up and go past him. And here's the freaky thing, Rob. When they get on down the road 2 or 3 miles, there he is walking again. There's just no way humanly possible this guy could get from point A to point B, passing you at 40 or 50 miles an hour going down the highway. Now, out in the Southwest, you have long stretches of long, lonely highway and godforsaken places where anything can happen out there. And Walking Sam's one of them. Absolutely.
Is Walking Sam or on these, is he like again another thing if you come across, it's perhaps another I don't know, it's another part of the 411, right? The who knows? Because you know what the 411 is made of, comprised of. People have their theories. I think there's 15 different ways people are become an unfortunate member of the 411, and right here, perhaps that's another thing to look into.
Well, there are supposedly connections with Walking Sam and the mysterious black vans that they talk about on the reservations.
Okay.
Now, these vans have been seen in people's driveway. They'll be parked. You come home and this van's parked in your neighbor's driveway. You've never seen before. They are solid black vans, Carroll vans. It's the way it's described. They never see a tag on it. But people disappear wherever this van is supposedly seen.
Hmm.
If it's seen in the neighborhood, there will be a disappearance afterwards. And supposedly, Walking Sam has been seen to get into these vans and go or leave the road that way. But there's supposed to be a connection between that. But people in the res are definitely afraid of a black van or a black car. They consider it an evil omen like thing. I mean, going on. There's something bad gonna happen or whatever. Um, but they're supposedly tied to a lot of strange and mysterious disappearances in those vicinities.
So we're talking the black van. Is it?
Hmm.
It comes out of nowhere. It kind of appears. I mean, does has it ever
Yeah.
been seen driven or any people inside the van driving
Well,
it?
people see it go down the road sometimes, but most of the time they just see it parked somewhere. It'll
Okay.
be parked somewhere, and that's what spooks them. And there is a belief. Some people believe that they are kidnapping people to steal organs from them. Hmm.
What else is that? What the ghoul's job is? They steal organs from the newly dead at grave sites. Is that correct?
Hmm. Absolutely, yeah. There is supposedly, according to some of this 411 stuff, that
Mm,
there's like, I think, 600,000 people disappear in this country alone every year.
right.
That's over 500,000 people. Where are they going? What's happening? A lot of people on the res think that some of these people are victims of skinwalkers. And skinwalkers, I'm going to tell you this about the skinwalker, they are witches. They have to do rituals, blood sacrifice rituals and stuff. There is a fear on the reservation, especially with a lot of the people that disappear are young people
Mm,
between the ages of 12 and 16 years old that disappear, and most of them are females.
mm.
Something weird is going on there. Whatever you want to attribute it to Walking Sam or the Black Vans or the organ stealers or what, the skinwalkers or what. It's weird. It's strange.
There's so much weird stuff. I mean, if we go back to the walking stick, and this isn't walking Sam at all, but I
Mm,
always tell this story about what I saw. This is maybe about 7, 8 years ago. Again, it's at Dead Man's Curve where I talked about the Dead Man's Curve, and I just went over that. If you're new, if you're just tuning on in, you have to watch the replay. But I was in the Dead Man's Curve, and there's a meadow on the outside of the wood line where the stream runs through. And I'm standing with, again, my same friend, one of my other buddies, Brian. And again, as I said, we hung out there. That's kind of our spot.
mm,
And this is even after we saw the ghost. This is a couple of years later or whatever, because we just like going there. And I'm looking, I see this stick pops up. It's maybe 16 inches sticking out of the ground. I thought nothing of it. Dry tree fall, a branch, not paying no mind. And I'm looking at it. And just as I'm ready to turn my glance away, the stick, Dennis, got up a little higher. And I kid you not, it started running literally with these spindly little legs and little arms popped out of the side. And it was running mechanically down the meadow, down this hill towards the creek. I'm not scared. This is daytime and I'm running after this thing. I want to see what in the world is this thing. And it was like a stick figure with little arms and legs sprouted out, and it's running. And my buddies, I said, get over here, run over here. We're watching this thing. I'm getting closer and closer. It goes down the hill, and then it jumps into the water. And when it hits the water, Dennis, it turned into another natural looking stick and kind of floated down the river, down the creek. Actually, it's more of a creek than a river,
mm.
all the way out of sight. I don't know if that was a bug, an insect that I've never heard of before, but I got to tell you, to be 12 to 16 inches and run like a person, that's something more than an insect, if you ask me.
Well, that is a typical sighting of what they call the black stick men.
Mm,
They're solid black. They're long, tall, very thin, incredibly thin,
yeah.
thin as a pencil kind of a thing. That's why they look like a stick. Although sometimes these things can look like a branch off of a tree if they want to, and fool you that way. Because I have heard reports of these stick men being seen in the forest, and you couldn't see them until they moved because they were long, tall, and thin. They blend in perfectly with the wood of the trees. Just like if you're deer hunting, the first rule of deer hunting, you look for something that goes straight across. That's the back of the deer. That's what breaks up the trees in the
Yeah.
forest. That's how you. Well, this is the opposite. It's hard to see because it's just like the rest of the trees. And of course, there are a lot of legends worldwide of walking trees. By the way, I won't get into that. But anyway, uh, that's an interesting aspect too. But I believe these black stick men are some kind of interdimensional beings of some sort, and I believe they're flashing through or walking through our reality, or however way you want to term that. And these things can be described from what you talk about, from like a foot high on up to 10 or 12 foot tall.
Wow.
There is a very famous sighting of a stick man that had to be 12 to 15 feet tall that climbed up the side of a building. Um, that somebody looked out their window and saw this on an apartment building or something next door to them. They saw this thing climbing up there, and they moved kind of mechanically, the way just like you described. It was very mechanical, kind of looking, or very robotic kind of a movement
Yeah.
to them. Yeah, and that goes along with it too. What is that? I mean, it's not walking sound. No, walking sound's different. He's extremely tall, but he's more like a person, a very thin person. But these things, what we're talking about here, the black stick men, are something that are completely, in my book, otherworldly. They don't really belong here. Where the heck are they coming from? I think it has to be some type of interdimensional being of some sort, without a doubt.
Perhaps that was. I thought it was fascinating, kind of creepy. Again, I wasn't scared, and I really kind of wrote it off as maybe. Well, of course, I couldn't find it. I thought maybe it was just a weird bug,
Uh,
insect. But then again, who am I kidding? It was a stick to start walking. I've never seen a bug even that big. The biggest bugs I get here are praying mantises, right? And
yeah.
and so I just thought it was very unusual. And then, and of course, this was well before I got involved with any of this. And so a lot of these things that I've seen, they all come full circle. And I look back on my life, a lot of things that I've seen, now I have a different viewpoint on, where it's actually was something from perhaps a different realm. I had this guy on the show not too long ago. He sent me this email. We got to talking on the phone how he went camping. And we're talking, this is kind of, I think, the more the elementals, talking about elementals here. He was
Uh-huh.
camping in the forest where he's been camping 10, 15, 20 years. Very familiar. There's a river that runs through where he was camping at. And he says, Rob, it's the strangest thing. I started on a hike and I veered off on a different trail because I thought the trail was a little odd because I had never seen it here before. So he said, so I
Uh-huh.
veered to my left, he says, and he's walking down this trail. Then all of a sudden, Dennis, he goes, I don't know if I walked through some sort of portal or whatever, but all of a sudden, I ended up still in the forest, but the entire complexity, the terrain, the look of the forest just changed. Very different. Something he had never ever in his life encountered in this forest, which he'd been going to for a decade or longer. He got this feeling that he was in a different realm. He got this feeling that he knows he's lost and now he's kind of panicking and he cannot find his way back. He went and looked on his compass. He pulls out his phone, his cell phone. He had a cell phone. This happened back in the 2020s, and there's nothing. Everything is going hectic on him. The man is lost, panicking. So he decides to turn around and trying to find his way back. And the river is gone. And the thing is, the river that would follow this campsite that disappeared. It was just this different forest. So he's walking through the forest. It gets even creepier, and he thought that he was getting very scared because all these faces in the trees like weird looking faces of humanoid objects started appearing at the trunks above the ground, maybe 3, 4 feet. Faces, which he stopped dead in his tracks, scared, doesn't know what to do, panics. But then something in his mind said, as scary as it is to follow the faces, because these faces, as he proceeded to walk, they would pop up during in the tree line. And so he just says, he's thinking that maybe this is instead of scaring him, perhaps he's being helped. So he followed along, and then the faces ended. And then before you know it, he hears the running stream. He heard the river flowing in the background. Then all of a sudden, he recognizes that it is his river that he's familiar with. He felt he was now back into a place of familiarity. Followed the river a little longer around the bend to his campsite. Rob, he says to me, he never experienced that in his life, ever.
I had something very similar like that happen to me, Rob. One day out in the forest, on a trail I knew very well. This trail was not that far down into the forest. I knew this trail like the back of my hand. And I went down this trail, and I'll tell you what the day was. The day was overcast. And I was not going to stay too long because I could call a thunderstorm or something going on out there. And so I went down this trail. I got about halfway down the trail, and I began to notice I could hear any birds. Everything was eerily silent. And the trail started turning. I said, this is not right because this is not the way that trail went. Okay. And I'm going, I got the weirdest feeling that something was out of place. And something just was not right. There was something weird going. I looked down at my compass. I always wear a compass on my watch band, and that compass is going like this, going around and around. I'm so, okay, this is not good. There's just something weird going on here that I never have experienced before. And here's the interesting thing. The forest was like the woods itself was changed. It was like you'd be walking somewhere and there's a big cloud comes over the sun and everything gets darker and cooler like. And that's the way it felt here. This was a hot day, like in the 80s or 90s. Okay. Yeah. Everything just sort of like was cooler. It was just weird. And then I began to notice shadows in the trees moving around me. Okay. Shadows as if something were casting a shadow here and there and all that. So I said, okay, that's enough. I don't recognize this trail anymore. I don't recognize any of this. I'm turning around and I'm going back. Now, I was not on this trail. I guarantee you, as sure as we're sitting here right now, I was not on this trail any more than 10 minutes, okay? I was going to back up the trail. Again, I hear the birds. I hear the birds singing. It's like, the cloud is gone. I mean, it's not sunshiny, but it's lighter. And the weird tingling in the air is kind of gone. My compass is okay. I get back to point A I started from, and I'm like 35 or 40 minutes. There should have been only 10. Wow. That was a weird, freaky. It was almost like I walked through some kind of a portal.
So you lost time. Or time was advanced, correct? You thought you're 10 minutes, now it's 35 minutes.
It's supposed to be 10 minutes, now it's about 35, 40 minutes, something like that. And there was no way I stayed there that long. I know I was not going that long. I mean, I went down the trail, got to that point, and turned around. Yeah. I didn't hang around watching, and I turned around and started back. And it should not have took me 35 minutes to get back to point
A. A lot of people associate time loss with alien abduction. What's your thought?
I don't think that happened.
I'm not saying you were. I don't think you were abducted, but it seems like that's a commonality with a lot of people when they go through those regressive therapy sessions because they were missing time, and then they go back and they're during the therapy session where they were on some craft.
That's what I think. What happened to my 25, 30 minutes I'm missing? What happened to it? That's weird. But a lot of this alien abduction, I think, may have some kind of portal connection with it too, as well. this space and time thing. And I'm gonna tell you a thing about a portal, Rob.
Yeah.
It's just like you're punching a hole through time and space.
Okay.
So really, that space that you're making, that hole that you're punching through there, where are you at that time? You know what I'm saying? You're out
Mhm.
of time and space. That's just the way that would have to go. You know, that's freaky stuff.
I find that fascinating, and probably with these portals, time and space, again, probably another 411. Because I imagine not everybody that walks through a portal, like this person I just talked about, he made it back. I think he was guided by maybe the elementals or whatever that was. Those trees were perhaps, but a lot of people that fall through a portal, they don't come back, do they?
Well, there's one question I have about my own experience. What would have happened to me if I'd have went on down that trail? Maybe if I'd have disappeared forever or what? Maybe I could have never got back. Maybe it's a good thing I turned around and went back when I did. Maybe that happens to a lot of these people that go missing. You have to wonder.
Have you heard about speaking of the missing, have you ever heard about the mysterious staircases found in the forest, in the middle of the forest? There's a
Oh,
staircase in the middle of the woods, and
mhm.
allegedly people have gone up the staircase, never returned, and then the staircase vanishes.
I've heard a lot of reports on this, and a lot of people have talked about it. And here's my own piece of advice on it. If you come upon a mysterious stairway out in the forest or out in
Right.
the middle of nowhere, do not climb it. That would not be a good idea, I don't think, to go up that staircase.
Yeah, and these staircases, they have no structure around them. It's not like it was part of a home. It's just a staircase flat out in the woods. That's it. No other foundation. It's just a staircase.
Mhm.
And some are made of rock, some are made of trees. Like it was made humanly. I don't think no human is going to make it, but mostly a lot of times it's made of rock and blocks. And occasionally,
Mhm.
yeah, you hear about trees. Just nowhere. It's just in the middle. It just what is it even doing here?
Mhm.
And I don't think that any cryptids made that. I think it was put there by something, probably something not in our
Yeah,
reality.
I'm going to talk about this on my show from
Okay.
Paranormal Point of View Friday night. Listen, there are certain things that we talk about in demonology that are called demon traps and devil snares.
Okay.
There are, I think, things, traps and things like that are set for human beings sometimes, and we foolishly may blunder into them. But there is an intelligence behind this, a very diabolical intelligence, I think, that are setting these snares and traps for us. I can tell you without a doubt, some of these snares and traps are set in cemeteries. Things, items that you may pick up and take home with you that have a curse on them that will turn your life into a living hell once you take this back. I used to tell people, I've done a lot of teaching seminars out in cemeteries, by the way, telling people how to investigate these areas and all that. And I say my number one rule when it comes to cemetery is take nothing home ever from a cemetery, because you don't know what you're taking back with you.
No, I'm not. We don't have time for my story, and a lot of people have heard it. I picked up some things when I was married back in my early 20s. We used to collect things, artifacts from resale shops, antique shops. And I got to tell you something, and I'm not going to get into the story. I've said it before, but maybe some other time. I brought something home, which I was seeing shadow people in my house. Yeah. I see shadows come out of the darkness. I had a room that was very, very dark. Yet I started seeing a darkness that superseded the darkness of my home. And I thought I was going nuts. I didn't tell the wife for a long time. And I would start seeing shadows in the corner of my eyes. I didn't realize that the side of your peripheral vision, I started researching our cones and our eyes can see almost to 360 degrees. We don't realize it, or 180 at least, right? And
Uh-huh.
so and this was going on for quite some time. And I was about ready to tell my wife, right? But I was reluctant. I said, I got to tell you something finally, because I couldn't take it. She goes, don't tell me you're seeing shadow things or something. I go, yeah. She goes, I've been seeing them too. She knew me. We knew each other a long time when we got married. We were married 7 years. Yeah, and so, and again, this is way before I did any of this. As I was in my 20s. One day I got
Uh-huh.
home from work, and there was she had got a psychic, called us, hired a psychic to investigate her house. She's walking through the house. Every room was fine as she walked through, and now we have these artifacts in an antique in a room, and we put them all in curio cabinets. We had like 3 curio cabinets with lights, and everything we bought was really cool stuff, odd stuff. It was like stagecoaches, it was weird looking
Uh-huh.
houses, hotels, just all sorts of weird stuff, I guess you would call it. And as soon as a woman walks in this room, Dennis, she felt cold. She felt like, and she immediately said, "This is the source of what's in this house." So again, I'm like, "Well, thank you so much for that. Here's your $50. See you later." Again, not a, it was just was like, okay, I don't know about all this. And this is a guy that saw ghosts too earlier in my life, but I just could not put my, I guess I just couldn't wrap my hands around it. So I got to tell you, packed up all the objects, and I put them in the garage. This was like in the winter time, so I put them all in the garage. So the shadow people, we stopped seeing the shadows, and we also had a negative energy for several months. My wife was doing bad on her job. People were getting sick. I mean, it was just terrible. But as soon as I got within 3 days or so of taking those artifacts out of my house, uh, the life got back to normal. Never again saw the shadow people.
Uh-huh.
Springtime comes. I'm in the garage, and I had put all the artifacts in the right hand corner of the garage, and I am. The sun is coming up. I'm doing some spring cleaning, and I'm in the garage. It's dark. It's darky dusky in the garage, but I can still see. There's enough light where I can clean up and do what I need to do. And lo and behold, Dennis, guess what appears to me on the back wall of the garage? The shadow, the dark shadow figure. I yell out to my wife, "Get your ass out here! I gotta show you." Oh my god! Of course, when she gets out there, it's not there. And I told her, "Look, the same things that were in the house are now in the garage, where our artifacts are, by the way." And she goes, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me!" So she hung out with me for 10, 15 minutes, and then it showed itself to her as well. I took all that stuff, Dennis, out of the corner of my garage, put it in my pickup truck, and there was a dump a couple miles up the road where people could dump things. Took the stuff there, and don't know if this was the right thing to do because I put that craziness on somebody else, I suppose. It's part of the land. It's like a landfill. Dumped it all in there and never had that experience again. And that, my friend, was another creepy part of my life.
I'm gonna tell you something, Rob. When you start seeing shadows in the peripheral vision, you're glimpsing the veil. Okay, that's usually what's happening. There's a spiritual thing going on. You're glimpsing the veil, and let me tell you a quick story about taking things home. Okay, I had a lady call me one time, many years ago, and she was experiencing the routine paranormal activity. You know, cold spots, doors opening, lights going off, and all that. And she said, "I just don't understand what's going on. I've never had this problem before." You know. Well, I said, there's got to be a reason. You know, there's a reason behind everything. So you look for it. You got to find the key to it, and that tells you the story. You know, that's what I do when I first begin to investigate something like that. I look for the keys that will tell me what I need to know. So I asked this woman, I said, have you been playing with the Ouija boards? Have you been dabbling in witchcraft? Anybody in your house been? Oh, no, we're good. We're very religious people. We don't do that kind of stuff and all that. And I said, well, something has caused this to happen, you know. And then I thought, well, have you brought anything into your house new lately? You know, anything that,
Yeah.
any kind of item? She said, oh, no, I haven't. Well, I did buy a love sofa, love seat sofa at a garage sale a couple of weeks back. And I said, oh, well, I said, go back to where you bought this and find out what the history is on this love seat thing, that you got. So she called me like a week later and she said, how did you know to do that? I said, well, that's what we always do. We
Yeah.
always try to look at these different things on that. She said, well, I found out about the love seat. A man committed suicide on that love
Oh,
seat.
yeah, boy.
There you go.
There you go. I guess that's a good way to end it. Again, we could talk for 10 hours, but that's why I have you back every couple months because there's always so much to dive into. I appreciate your time with us, Dennis. Where again, I know you did it earlier. Where can we can find? I got all your links. Will be in my in this video for everyone. Your books and your Hunting in the Shadows podcast. So once again, why don't you tell people where they can find you, Dennis?
Okay, I have 3 podcasts that go on every week. Monday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the road less traveled with my good friend Gerald Fountain. And then Wednesday night, my premiere podcast is Hunting the Shadows. That's at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Friday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard, all I'm out at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I have Paranormal Point of View. We're going to be talking about cursed objects, by the way, this weekend.
Well,
So,
I'll be tuning in or getting a replay on that one because I had that. And I do want to thank everybody for coming in. If you're new today, please subscribe to Bigfoot Mr. Rob on YouTube, Texas Front Porch, The Blondes and the Booze, Dennis Carroll's Hunting the Shadows, my buddy Josh Turner, PRT, if not already, Barton Unley as well, in Humanoids. Great people to hang out with and get information from. I also need to thank, once again, Keith, Fisher of Spam, Diane Boss for the awesome super chats. Love you guys. I appreciate it. Like the show because that does help the analytics. And as we all know, it's all about analytics these days. So when you get my book and Amazon comes calling, do me a favor, leave a review, even if you don't like the book, which I doubt you probably love it. But I'm just saying, leave a review. It helps push it. Book 2 coming out end of July. Thanks to everybody in chat. Love you guys. Dennis, I always love having you on. I learn something every time I have you on, and we'll have you back.
It's always a pleasure.
We'll have you back. We'll have you back soon. I know the people love what you have to say. And with that being said, I've got to find the exit button here. Thanks to everybody. Like, share, subscribe. For Dennis Carroll, I am BMR. Until next time, I'm out.